And I'm kind of surprised Disney hired Robert Zemeckis to direct something again, considering the last movie he did was Mars Needs Moms, which bankrupted his animation studio and made almost nothing. But I think when they saw what they do with him, they'll forgive him because this version of Pinocchio was pretty good. So if you saw my ranking of the Disney animated movies that I did last year when Encanto came out, you probably remember that in the Golden Age ranking video, Pinocchio was number one. And in the ranking of all 60 of the animated Disney films, if it wasn't in the top 10, it may have just barely squeaked out of the top 10. So, in 60 films, when it's in the top 10 or pretty close to it, you know that I love the original animated version. So, is it worth watching this new version? I'd say yes. It's familiar enough that it's not unrecognizable. It has all the charm and excitement of the original, and there's also material that's new enough to make this retelling worth at least checking out. First off, the kid they got to voice Pinocchio sounds spot on. He sounds exactly like the original actor. Now, the CGI, it's pretty good. It is a little hit or miss. There's no moments where it looks bad, but it's not 100% perfect. There are a few moments where the CGI on some of the characters can look a little off, but for the most part, I'd say this film is a visual marvel. But I think this movie was originally intended for a theatrical release, specifically in 3D, because there are several moments in this film where things are supposed to be flying out of the screen or they're filmed at specific enough angles that it makes me think this was supposed to be 3D. And coming from Robert Zemeckis, who directed this, that's not surprising because all of his movies that he's done over the past 20 years or so have been 3D. Polar Express, Monster House, movies like that. Now, the two things I didn't really care for in this film is, one, the Blue Fairy is so creepy looking. Now, I'm not slamming on the actress's performance. She gave a good performance, but it's the character design. The way they made her look is incredibly unsettling. Luckily, she's only in the movie for the first few minutes and then never shows up again. And I think they realized that. I think maybe test screenings went, we can't really fix the design, so we'll cut her down to the first 10 minutes or so and then never again. And two, given that this is a Robert Zemeckis film, and people have been joking for years about how creepy Polar Express and his other films look, I was expecting the scene where the kids turn into donkeys to be a lot more intense than it is. Unfortunately, the animated version of that scene is still scarier. They don't really show the kids turning into donkeys. It's more implied. It's more off-screen. It's not as scary as the animated version, which was disappointing. And there are a few changes and additions to this version. Obviously, in this day and age, you can't show kids smoking or drinking. So they make it so that in the Pleasure Island scene, the kids are instead drinking root beer, see what we did there, and eating junk food. And honestly, Zemeckis, he did a great job with the Pleasure Island scene. He made it look absolutely fantastic. You can see why a kid would be tempted to stay there. His version of Pleasure Island was such a visual treat. And Luke Evans, who played Gaston in the live-action Beauty and the Beast a few years ago, he plays the coachman who runs it in this version. And they gave him a really catchy villain song. But in regards to the Pleasure Island scene, there's this weird thing about smoke monsters on the island that take the kids away after they turn into donkeys, and they're scary looking, but they're also just kind of there. They just kind of exist. They never explain what these smoke monster things are, and it's completely dropped, which does bring me to another point. Now, in the original, people may not realize this until I point this out, but in the original, none of the villains are brought to justice. Stromboli doesn't face any consequences for his actions. The coachman who runs Pleasure Island doesn't face any consequences for his actions. And Honest John and whatever the cat's name is, they don't face any consequences for their actions. But in this version, they let you know Stromboli does get arrested. But on the other hand, the coachman is not. And, Honest John gets away with it, basically, and the kids are still left donkeys. So that seems kind of inconsistent. Why say, Stromboli got arrested, and then not show the other villains suffering consequences for their actions? Seems kind of an inconsistent choice. Now, in regards to the songs in this movie are great. Let me put your minds at ease. Sometimes these remakes can kind of ruin the songs. Specifically, Be Prepared from the live-action Lion King. They completely botched that. But all of the new versions of this song feel very respectful of the original. The actors who sing them give great performances, and the one or two new songs that they add are also great additions. Honestly, I think if Walt Disney were still alive today and he saw this version, he'd be extremely proud. It maintains all the same heart, terror, and lessons in the original, while also being unique enough to justify watching it. This new Pinocchio is magical, and that's no lie. I give this version of Pinocchio an A-, a 9 out of 10, and a 4 out of 5 stars.